You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode, we're covering the British horror film The Ritual, directed by David Bruckner, released on Netflix February 9th, 2017 or 18? 2018 is what's on here.
Yeah, it was actually released in the UK in October of 2017.
Yeah.
They sold it to Netflix.
Cool. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. The movie was filmed in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania and was actually representing the Kungsleden, or the King's Trail in northern Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
It was based on the 2011 British horror novel by Adam Neville. And David Bruckner directed movies like The Signal and the segment in VHS called Amateur Night. And he was also a producer on Siren, which was kind of a spin-off from that Amateur Night that was in VHS. Unlike other movies that we've covered before, there was not a lot of budget information available. It was kind of hush-hush. In fact, there were not a lot of developmental notes available anywhere.
Interesting.
So this was a challenge this time to dig up any information about the background of the film. It did gross $1.7 million at the box office before it was sold to Netflix for $4.75 million.
Nice.
And it's 94 minutes long. Hake, would you like to give us a synopsis of The Ritual?
All right. The synopsis is, a group of college friends reunite for a trip to the forest, but encounter a menacing presence in the woods that's stalking them.
I think that's perfect.
Sums it up pretty nicely.
It really does. You know, I remember the buzz when it was released on Netflix, and I was really intrigued to watch it. And on my first watch, I found that I didn't love it as much as I thought I would.
Really?
It was kind of predictable at times. Of course, they're going to get lost in the woods. Of course, someone's going to get hurt. People are going to die. It just seemed almost like some British version of the Blair Witch Project, potentially. Reminded me of that anyway. However, when I watched it again, I actually enjoyed it a lot more.
Nice.
I paid more attention to some of the character stuff that was going on. We have 5 friends who presumably have known each other for quite some time.
Yeah.
They're meeting up at a restaurant to talk about planning a guy's weekend or vacation. You can tell from that time that Luke really was kind of the odd man out, because the other 4, it seemed like they had careers, they were married, they had moved on beyond this bro type world that happens in college, I guess. But he really hadn't done all of the things that the others had done. And so I found his character really relatable in that way, because I think every friend group has that one person that doesn't follow the same path as everyone else. Mm-hmm. And when his friend Rob is murdered in front of him and he didn't do anything to stop it, you could really see the complexity of his character, because from that point on, he was like a tortured soul.
Absolutely.
They walked into the store, didn't realize that it was being robbed at the time, had a little conversation, and then Luke runs and hides behind a shelf with a bottle of what I think was vodka.
Yeah.
And Rob stands there and gives up his watch, gives up his wallet, but refuses to part with his wedding ring, which ultimately ends in him getting killed. Mm-hmm. And Luke did nothing to stop it, did not try to make some kind of stand. And you could see at one point he was looking down at the bottle, and it looked like he flipped it around like he was going to break it, and he was going to try to do something, but then he didn't.
Yeah.
And so being the person that was there, the one friend that was actually in the store and could have done something to stop it, I think that put him in a really weird situation, post the murder, because I can imagine that the loss of a friend would definitely change any dynamic of friends. Mm-hmm. But you could tell that there was an underlying feeling, I don't know if it was resentment or frustration, especially with Dom.
Yeah, definitely with him.
It was kind of unsaid at the beginning. Dom blamed him, despite the fact that had Luke intervened, he probably would have been killed as well.
Possibly, yeah. And yeah, you notice that with Luke is because, yeah, it obviously is haunting him even to this point of 6 months later when they are on this hiking trip. But, he was scared and kind of left Rob in the aisle there, which, I mean, may not have been a great thing to do. But at the same time, I don't know what I would do in that situation. It's really hard to tell. Like, you can't, it's easy for, you could have done, should have done, would have done. But, unless you're in a situation like that, you really don't know how you're going to act or behave. And I don't know, maybe he was not expecting it to go that way. I really wouldn't have. I mean, even my first watch of the movie, definitely that fatal violence seemed very sudden and unexpected, where, these guys seemed like they were petty criminals who were just getting away with whatever they could. And then they just kill Rob. And you're like, I think even they were shocked a little bit that they ended up killing him. So it was just a messy situation all around.
Yeah, it really was. I felt for Luke in that situation because I felt, like you said, I feel like people think that they would do things differently if it was happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really think about it, none of us know, unless we're in that situation, exactly how we would respond to it.
Yeah.
And I felt for him because anyone could have been the person. Any of the other guys could have been the one that was hiding behind that shelf.
Mm-hmm.
They probably would have reacted the same way.
Yeah.
Because what's inherent in any regular person is you want to save the day, you want to help other people, but in many ways you look at trying to save yourself and how you can protect yourself in situations like that. And I think you become torn between wanting to be the hero and wanting to save your friend and wanting to ensure that you get to walk out of the store.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a conflict.
Yeah, well, it's the fight or flight response, which is naturally ingrained in a person, to where typically that first action that you take, whether it's fight or flight, isn't really up to you in the moment. It's kind of where your nature takes hold. So it seems to be, at his point in that, at that time, flight was where his nature went. And then he had the opportunity to pick fight, but the flight still won. And
yeah.
Again, you can see where he would be blamed, but at the same time, like, maybe not. Like, how does he respond? And we see how he responds, but how would you respond? How would I respond? Only putting yourself in that situation would really tell.
Yeah, I agree. It's really difficult to say how anyone would respond in that situation. And I felt for him. And I think that throughout the movie, we see visual representation of the torment that he was going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really didn't see the dreams that the other friends were having.
Mm-hmm.
We did hear Dom explain what was going on in his dream, which turned out to be kind of telling and a foreshadowing of his death. But the only real glimpse that we got into the other dreams was Luke, what Luke was seeing. And you could see the torment because he was reliving this moment.
Yeah.
I like the way that they interspersed all of that so that you knew it was a dream and there were these little pieces that made you see that too, like the dirt floor, or when he's running at one point and there's just like shelves of things. And
yeah,
I like the way that was shot, the way that it was all interspersed together, because it really, to me, showed his conflict of what he would have done, what he should have done, what he didn't do, going back and forth.
Yeah, which it's those two worlds colliding. It's that, like, the nightmare, the living nightmare versus the nightmare of his memories, and they start to blend a little bit. And I've got some fun stuff that I'll get into about this movie and kind of a deep dive later on that kind of shows that at a point it's not a dream anymore. These things are real, at least to him, and there's a reason for that. And I'll talk about those. It'll be
awesome.
Really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I really liked right from the start, though, that we got to see the 5 friends at the bar together talking, because it gave you that glimpse into their friendship a little bit. And that's where you see that Luke is he's part of the group, but he's also different.
Yeah.
He wants to go do all the fun things.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else wants to do something a little bit different, like going hiking or taking trips to see scenic places instead of going to Amsterdam or, Las Vegas, I think was even mentioned at one point.
Yeah.
He wants to do all the fun
Mhm.
things, and everyone else is taking more of an adult approach to it, of looking at experiences,
Yeah.
full experiences versus quick little trips.
Yeah. He's kind of the guy in the friend group that, not to sound too harsh, but yeah, like that hasn't really grown up yet. The rest of the guys they're all married. I think some of them have kids. I know they talk about Hutch had kids, and so they've got families, and they're kind of making these more grown up decisions, and yeah, Luke is the one that wants to just keep it, back like in the day when they were in college and party. And
He does. I feel like he wants it to be that way. And as hard as he tries to keep them there, he's really the only voice that's keeping them in that area, because everyone else has moved on and he's kind of been left behind. And you feel for him in that respect because, like I said earlier, we all have a friend in our group, or we may be the friend in our group that isn't really going in the direction of everyone else.
yeah.
It's hard to try to hold everyone back to that place when they've all obviously moved on.
Mm-hmm. So that's a big theme of this movie and I think even the director had even stated that if you want to find themes or deeper meanings under this movie, it's about kind of the letting go of masculinity and like this like macho kind of thing is part of it. But then also a big part is understanding that sometimes like you outgrow, or at least, you outgrow your friends, and that's okay. Or sometimes your friends outgrow you or move on in different directions, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's very true to life.
Mm-hmm.
I think people grow and change all the time, and it's what happens sometimes when you have kids that you're friends with right from, grade school, and then you all get up and grow and graduate and move on and go your separate ways to college or to work. It's never going to be the way that it was before.
Yeah.
Because everyone is growing and changing. And when you're together and all growing together, that's one thing. But when you all go your separate ways and are exposed to different things and you start growing in different directions, it's often hard to really keep that deep connection. I feel like Luke really was trying to hold on to that. And
Yeah.
I think them going to Sweden in honor of Rob was a wonderful, poignant gesture.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know Dom's not a hiker. That was very clear.
Yeah.
I don't know really, though, that anyone really wanted to go there. I think they did it for Rob.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that any of them really wanted to go there. Was interesting, too, for me to watch Hutch, because he was kind of the person that was keeping everyone under control.
Oh man, yeah. I loved Hutch. I loved the character. I was like, this is the guy that I want to have in a group of people that I'm in. Like that kind of he holds the group together. He was kind of the peacekeeper and that anchor, and I really liked that. And he kept that the whole time until his unfortunate demise.
And you notice, too, as soon as he was gone, things really started to unravel.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Almost, it made me question, is it something that the monster sensed? Oh, well, this is the guy that keeps them together. We need to take him first, because then they'll all be lost and easier to kill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Possibly.
I thought it was interesting that he was the first one to go, because he really was the peacekeeper, like you said. And when they start to really be under duress, to lose the person that keeps you calm makes it worse.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Phil was already after the dream, and he was up worshiping that very strange thing that was in the tree thing that was in the attic. He was already, from that point on, I feel like he was already unraveling.
Oh, yeah.
At that point.
It would do a number on most people, I think.
I think so, too. And I think that he, at that point, just really started to unravel one step at a time. Every little thing that would happen, he just kept, to me, he was just disappearing. and it was only a matter of time. He was going to be the easy one to pick off because he had already lost his mind. And that was sad because I liked him too. I feel like they each had something special about them. But I think overall the story really was about these 5 friends that were in different places. And then one of them is tragically killed. And then it's about acceptance and forgiveness. And we learn that Dom has not forgiven and very much blames Luke.
Yeah. But looking at who Dom is, would he really have actually done anything any better or any different? Because he kind of seems like a coward in his own way.
I think he is a coward in his own way. And I don't think he's
going to be that person. Yeah.
I don't think he would have done anything different. I think he likes to think he would. But I don't believe he would have done anything different.
Yeah.
I think part of the blaming Luke, though, is I don't think he wanted to accept that his friend was killed. And I think blaming Luke made it so that he could get angry at someone for it, instead of actually processing the fact that he lost a friend in a very sad and unexpected way. I mean, they stopped to get alcohol. Anyone would do that anytime you would stop at a store to get, a 6-pack or some vodka or whatever. That's not something you would think twice about.
Yeah.
And they obviously didn't.
Yeah. The characters were definitely a big part of my notes and stuff too. And so trying to see what else that there is that, we haven't really covered. I think, just Luke himself, I still think there's some cool stuff that, I'll jump ahead in the movie a little bit. Obviously, he's the last one alive at the end of the movie. And so we get to see the most of him, so we get the most growth. But I really do think most of this movie, is about him coming to grips with being able to forgive himself. Because I think just as much as Dom blamed him, I think he did blame himself. And he needed somebody like Hutch to remind him that it wasn't his fault. And he needed friends. And so, of course, it hurts a lot when Dom strikes out at him. And then they end up fighting about that. But I do love that the way that, towards the end of the movie, you've seen a shift in him, where he is clocking old creepy cult ladies in the face, and he's shooting at giant monsters that doesn't do any good. But, he's found this courage, and it's to skip kind of to the ultimate, biggest moment there at the end of the movie when the Jotun, as it is, when it has found him and caught up to him, he bows for a minute there, and it is loving the fact that he's worshiping it, but then he stands up and in defiance. And instead of killing him right away, it says, no, I'm going to make sure that you're... And it pushes his face back down into the mud. And no, you grovel, you worship at my feet. And he picks up the axe and stands right back up again and whacks it. That moment of defiance and refusal to submit to this monster, I think he's finally redeemed himself for himself in some way. That, even though he has lost the rest of his friends and he's alone now, he's found that that's not necessarily okay, but he doesn't have to put that all on himself. This isn't all about him. He's not the monster. Clearly there is something else there, and he's not going to be, under its control anymore.
I like that he stood up multiple times in defiance. I was happy to see that. I also think that he was destroyed at the loss of Rob and maybe had questioned life in general after seeing that. And I think after chopping the Jotun and then escaping, I think the look on his face, to me, he found the will to live.
Yeah.
The will to go on and the will to let himself out of his own self-imposed life of misery that he had created for himself.
Yeah.
It was kind of a triumph.
Yeah.
I mean, he lost his friends, and that was devastating. But I feel like overall he found himself.
Yeah. Something else I'd love to talk about, I think, is just a lot of the aspects of the film itself, the visuals, the themes, like the horror, and a lot of the production stuff that I love so much. It really makes this movie for me. And so first, of course, the horror stuff, which you mentioned a little bit as kind of some of it seeming typical, especially on your first watch. I don't really see it that way myself, but I think sometimes you can do typical things in a creative way. And I do like that. The abandoned cabin in the woods trope, I think, was still done really well, because then you add the difference of these runes and the Jotun having control of that area. And it's these nightmares that it's able to, he sneaks up there and he gives them these nightmares, which, again, I will touch on a little bit more of the specifics on that, which I love. But
those dreams.
Yeah. And there's this ominous, like, Wicker Man style effigy in the attic, which absolutely not. No, thank you. Good day, sir. I don't want any part of that.
No one does.
It's creepy, which again, it looks, if you look at that thing, it is an effigy of the Jotun. It's got the human torso with the antlers, and the hands. It looks, that's what it is, it's something that is worshiping him. And then they get to a second creepy cabin and immediately just, yeah, no, fuck that. We're not doing that. And they walk away. And I was like, there you go. Now you're learning, which is great. And it's still, even knowing everything that's going on, like, it's a scary watch when they're all in their tents before Hutch is taken. And Luke is sitting there going through his stuff. And then you hear the branches snapping, and then you hear it getting closer and closer to where he has to turn off his light and he's just listening. My heart was racing during that moment because, yeah, that's horrifying. But I love the visual effects. And not really visual effects, but cinematography and visuals that they set up in this movie. Especially, I think one of the most important parts of this movie is these long, lingering shots of the trees.
Absolutely.
It's such a huge part of the movie, and they use it a lot, but it's creepy every time because you never know. Like, sometimes they just sit there and focus on the trees for a while, and then nothing happens. And then other times they sit there and focus on the trees for a while, and then something happens. And they play off of it.
But we still don't see anything.
Really well.
Like, they don't really show us the monster until very late.
They do. But you got to be paying attention. And that's what I want to talk about. I love this. My favorite shot of this whole movie is Luke leaving them after, Dom is complaining about his knee. And he goes, look, I'm going to go up to the ridge. I'm going to see what I can see, and I'll be back. Which, of course, then he goes up there. And it's not a clearing. It's just kind of these smaller trees. It's letting more light in and made it look like a clearing. So he's upset because he's like, it's just more forest from here. But then he's staring into these smaller, thinner trees this whole time. And I love the shot that if you're looking at that tree in the center, you can clearly see the Jotun's hand wrapped around the trunk of that tree in plain view the whole time. But it's just so still. And then as Luke is kind of about to leave, that hand pulls away from the tree and moves, and then you see the monster move between the trees. And it's a quick glimpse. You only kind of see his antlers, and he almost looks like a tree himself. And then Luke turns and runs, and I love that shot so much.
That's what makes it even creepier, is the fact that it could blend in with trees, because I did not see that.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, and then you get a very clear glimpse of him later on, which sounds like you might have missed. Go back and watch it sometime. I had to watch it a couple of times because I just geeked out every time. The second glimpse you see of the Jotun, as they're climbing the hill after they find the water and the footprints leading away in the mud. They're climbing up that hill, and it is a better view of it. You can almost see its entire front side. It's just standing in clear view between these trees, watching them. You see, yeah. If you rewatch it, you can see him in the background. He's kind of blending into the trees, and he's standing there completely still, but he's very clear in view. And then as soon as the last person passes, he turns and he starts walking, and you can see the full figure, the back and the legs and everything. And he just walks.
Oh my gosh.
Following them. It's so creepy. Yeah, but you see him very clearly if you know where to look, but it's just it's in the background.
Maybe I do now with your roadmap.
And
of when to look. Yeah. I will have to go back and look at those again.
Yeah, it's so cool because I just replayed that scene a couple times just so I could sit there, and as they're climbing, I'm just sitting there staring at the Jotun being like, I see you. You're just watching them. It's so creepy, but I love that. And then, of course, that visual when Luke gets out of the burning cabin, and that's when you see, it in full force, but it's just kind of this silhouette of horror where he's lifting the woman up with his arms, and you just see him in his full glory with the flames and stuff behind him. That's just an awesome visual.
I spent time trying to figure out what exactly it reminded me of, because the body reminded me of a moose, like when it was down all fours.
Yeah.
The body reminded me of a moose, but then it was like a person's body and a head in a trunk and more arms than I thought it had.
Yeah.
I couldn't even. I just know that when I was a kid, I was a Girl Scout and we had to go do these outings in the woods.
Yeah.
I would never go do it now after watching this movie. I'd be too afraid.
Yeah. Oh, man, I love that. I love it so much. It's a really great creature design.
And I will go back and watch to see if I can see it.
Yeah, definitely look for those. Yeah, those moments are great. Yeah, anything else that you want to talk about? I've got a few other things, but I'll jump it back to you for a minute.
The
All
dreams
right.
really hit me the most. I really wish we could have seen
Yeah.
what Phil's dream and Hutch's dreams were. All we know is that Hutch peed himself,
Yeah.
so it must have been terrifying. And Phil was basically worshipping at
Yeah.
the temple of the Jotun.
Yeah.
So that was bad.
Yeah.
And Dom told us a little bit, which was basically the foreshadowing of his death with his wife appearing. But Luke's dream was the only one that we saw. But I feel like I would have wanted to see more. Like, I wish we could have seen what the dreams were that the others were having.
Yeah.
But I understand, for storytelling, it probably wasn't necessary. But I would have liked to have seen that. I always like to go a little bit deeper with some movies, especially ones that have like tragedies and things happening. So you have some more to share, though.
Let's go ahead and break it down. Like, I've teased it a couple of times talking about the dreams and talking about the Jotun itself. So now I'm going to go into my deep dive for this week of the Easter eggs and the Nordic mythology and the Jotun itself and kind of what it is and what it represents.
Excellent. I always look forward to this part.
This is, it's so much fun. And I think this really, I loved the movie so much when I first watched it. But it's even so much more the second time knowing some of this stuff and like geeking out about this after I'd seen it the first time and then really diving in with this watch. And so I'm just going to kind of break into first some of the other mythology surrounding it. These runes that they see around the cabin that are carved into the trees and hanging from the cabin and things like that. There's two predominant ones that you see, which is, and I don't know how to pronounce these exactly, so I'm going to give it my best shot. It's all Nordic stuff, so I'll try. But one of the runes, which kind of looks kind of like an upside down fish kind of thing, is the Odal rune, which roughly translates to inherited estate or property, something like that. And then we see the Algi's rune, which is kind of like the Y with the three prongs or whatever. And that one mainly translates to elk.
Oh, okay.
Which could be referring directly to the Jotun, as he's got kind of this elk body and these antlers. And so you see these runes together a lot, which kind of you put them together. It's the property of the elk. This is his land. This is his area. This is where, which is pretty ominous, I thought. It's really cool. The term Jotun, which is what they call him, the term Jotun itself is actually a very broad term in Norse mythology. It's anything that is within the realm of the gods. So elves, trolls, Thor, Loki, whatever, they're all Jotun. It's a broad umbrella term. Typically, though, they do use it more to refer to the giants, the ice giants, the frost giants and stuff. We see this a lot in like the Marvel movies with Thor and Loki, and that it's the exact same mythology that they pulled those characters from. The Jotun in this movie, although it is not named in this movie, they say that we don't speak his name. But this was based off of a novel, off of a book, and in which the book they do give him the name Moder, and so I kind of refer to him a little bit there. But according to this, he is the bastard son of Loki in this movie. Now, in the actual Norse mythology, that's not really part of it anywhere that I looked up. There is no Moder. There is no... But, I think they can use that in this story, whether the novel and in this movie, to say, oh, he's a bastard son that Loki didn't recognize. So then they can just kind of add to the mythology and play with it with this character, which is totally fine. And so, I like that. So maybe he's just like, this bastard son that Loki doesn't recognize. The way that the Moder, I'll call him Moder now, just for brevity's sake. The way that he kills people is inspired by Norse myth. In which Odin sacrifices himself to the cosmic tree Yggdrasil by impaling himself on his spear to gain knowledge of rune magic. And so there's this whole like gaining knowledge through impaling on these tree limbs, which the trees are definitely a very big part of the mythology of this character and kind of the religion that the cultists surround themselves with him. There's a fun little Easter egg or more of an exact mythological reference. When Luke and Dom escape Moder and they stumble into the cabin in the little village, and they fall on the floor, they see this woman kneeling in front of a statue or like a stone and praying to it or something. And the stone has a carving of a man with antlers on him, which could be just a visual reference to Moder there, or it could go a little further. This is what is referred to as the Kirkby Stephen stone or the Loki stone, which is a real stone, a real thing. It is housed in St. Stephen's Church in Kirkby Stephen in Britain, and it depicts the Norse god Loki bound and chained. So that could either be maybe they're also following and worshiping Loki because Loki is the father of Moder, or it could be the other side where maybe they despise him and they want, he's bound up because he abandoned and rejected Moder. I don't know. They don't dig too deep into that, but it's cool that they have those little nods to that. Now, being the bastard son of Loki, it seems that Jotun here, Moder, has inherited some of his father's powers a little bit. He has the ability to shapeshift, as we see whenever he comes out of the woods for Dom's sacrifice in the form of Dom's wife, Gale, to talk to him. And then also when Luke is having his quote-unquote dreams and is going through that, when one of the robbers and the killers that killed Rob looks up at him with these shining eyes, similar to the way Gale's eyes look, similar kind of to the eyes of Moder, and just looks straight at him and says, "Coward." And, it kind of breaks that fourth wall where it's not just a dream, but, he's talking to him. He's shape-shifted in that way. And I think these dreams themselves is another power that he's pulled from his god, or his father, Loki, known as the trickster god.
Yes, my favorite.
And yeah. And so I think that's what these dreams are. And when he keeps kind of pulling them in and out of these different visuals, especially we see Luke's, where he keeps, the storefront, the fluorescent lights and the shelves keep popping up whenever he's trying to escape. I think that's Moder being tricky, playing with him, playing with his mind, kind of these trickster effects coming in and out to trip him up. And yeah, I think that's just really cool that they really dug deep into that mythology and played around with it quite a bit.
They definitely did. Was there anything in your notes about the Jotun selecting people to join his little ancient cult of people who live forever?
Not really in my notes, but I do remember the woman talking to Luke, and when he asks, "Why am I here? Why are you picking me?" Because it seemed, he was marked the same way. He had those like claw marks in his chest, the same way she did, the same way the elder lady in the village did. And she tells us because your pain is deep, or your pain is, you have a lot of it. Like, it's this. And I think that's what it is he picks people he thinks, because of the fear and the pain and stuff they've gone through in life, that they're ready to give up, and it'll be somebody who will be easy to put into submission.
Yeah.
I don't think he was ready for Luke to defy him at the end. I think he figured, this will be an easy one.
Not at all. Luke standing up to him, I think, was a surprise.
Yeah.
Definitely. And when he came at him with the axe, I don't think he expected that either.
Yeah.
But I do love the growth that Luke had this entire movie. I feel like he started as a tortured soul and became a strong person who wanted to live by the end. And he was not going to bow down to anyone.
Yeah.
He was going to escape and go home and move on from all of this. And
yeah.
I do wonder, though, I thought about this, knowing how much Rob's death affected him, how he, post escape was going to process the loss of his other friends, because he was the only one left.
Yeah.
And although he wasn't responsible for their deaths, I just wonder how much that would have affected him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a question.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's left hanging at the end where you're like, well, good that he made it out of there, but that's still a lot of trauma he's going to have to process once he gets out of here.
Exactly. That's how I looked at it, too. Man. I'm like, I don't know how he's going to get through this, because losing one friend in a tragic way was hard enough. Losing 3 more and being the lone survivor, I'm just not sure how he would get past that.
Which, man, his acting in this, I kind of do. While we're on that, I just want to, shout out a little bit to the actor there, Rafe Spall, who played Luke. Which as soon as the movie started, I was like, oh my gosh, why does this guy look so familiar? And I was racking my brain. It was driving me crazy, so I had to look it up. And what it was is because I recently-ish over on the podcast Strange Indeed, we covered the Black Mirror episode White Christmas, in which he stars in that alongside John Hamm. And so I was like, that's who it is. It's that guy. It's like I just did a podcast episode with him, something he starred in. So that's why it was eating me away. Of course, then he was also in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and Men in Black International, which I saw both of those in theaters, but I haven't seen since. So that weren't as fresh in my mind. But
yeah, there were a lot of connections amongst the actors in this movie that have been on several British TV shows together. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But then looking into Rafe Spall, I agree, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Whether I liked the movie, didn't like the movie, loved it, hated it, whatever, no one could ever fault his acting.
Yeah.
His performance in this movie was really wonderful.
Yeah. Him and just the direction of this movie, I think. I was very impressed with David Bruckner as a director. At a point while watching it, I was like, I need to find out everything else he's done, and I need to see kind of what he's up to. So here's another, not deep dive, but a quick just look at David Bruckner. And you mentioned some of this kind of at the top of the podcast, because I really loved his style in this, especially with those lingering shots and the themes. And I was like, this is awesome. I got to see what else he's done. This was actually the first movie that he directed solo, that he did without being a part of like multiple directors filming segments for a movie, because he did segments in The Signal, VHS, and Southbound, but this was the first time he had full reign of an entire film on his own, which was really cool. He also directed 2 segments in the 2019 Creepshow reboot as well. And then he's got his newest film is called The Night House. Is a 2020 release, as far as it was released as part of Sundance Festival this year. But I guess it was slated to have a theatrical release, but then 2020 being what it was, it has not happened yet. So they're still kind of waiting on that. So there's no theatrical or streaming release for it widely, but I'll be on the lookout for it. And then he's got 2 films in development or pre-production. He's doing one called Out There, which is kind of in pre-production and in development, and then he is slated, nothing has happened yet because of pandemic garbage, but he is slated to direct a reboot of Hellraiser. So
he's the one behind
that.
Oh, well, I did enjoy Hellraiser, the original.
Yeah,
I do think it went down a really weird path from time to time in the sequels.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the original very much. So not that I think we need a new take on Pinhead. Mm-hmm. However, I would be interested, based on
seeing how
this movie, I would be interested to see what he would do. Because it could be good.
Yeah, based on how he works with creatures and kind of mythology behind them, that's great for the Cenobites, I think so.
Yes. They're very scary in their own right.
Yeah.
For sure. Oh my goodness. Well,
all right.
I only had a couple of production notes. I found out that there was a scene early on after they did the memorial to Rob that Hutch, Phil, and Dom all exit their tents in the order that they end up dying.
Interesting.
So there's a little trivia. And then at the end, the cult members, you may hear them chanting bloat. And it actually refers to as a trua ritual practice of offering a sacrifice to the gods for their favor. And I thought that was interesting to add to your deep dive. That's just a couple of things that I found. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
I don't think so. Other than I did mention the woman that was speaking in English to Luke in the cabin, and it was just one of those. They don't mention it. There's no actual confirmation, but I just had to question. I was like, I wonder, because they find that tent buried in the woods with the wallet and the driver's license and credit card or whatever from the 80s. I wonder if she's the wife/mother of that family.
I do have to wonder about that too, or the child, or a child.
Yeah, could be even because I mean the thing is that they're given eternal life
True.
and immortality, so who knows how time affects. I guess the bodies still kind of do decompose over time, as we see with the ancient ones up in the
Oh my goodness.
attic, which at that point immortality is just eternal torture at that point. I think Luke might have done the right thing by just setting them all on fire. That was pretty awful.
That was. And I have some things to share because this was based on a novel. I have some really interesting things to share with you about the book versus the movie.
All right. Which I have not read the book. Now, one of my best friends has. He loved the movie so much that he went out and got the book and read it, and he said it's great, but I haven't read it myself.
There's definitely one part that I think is going to make you laugh.
All right.
I'm quite sure that it will, because when I read it, I started laughing. So, spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't read the book. If you want to read the book, you may not want to hear what I have to say. I don't want to give too much away, so. Anyway, here are some spoilers. So, in the book, Rob and the store robbery murder don't exist at all. And then, Luke and Dom do make it to a farmhouse, but it's not the ancient cultists. It's people in animal masks that are a Swedish black metal band called Blood Frenzy. Seriously. They call themselves Loki, Fenrir, and Surtur. And after sacrificing Dom, they claim that they're Vikings and will sacrifice Luke to Odin.
Interesting.
I found that the whole Swedish black metal band called Blood Frenzy, that kind of pushed me over the edge.
Very different.
It really is. There are ancient ones that are in the attic. You did bring up that they call the beast Motor.
Mm-hmm.
And they give it a little bit more of a backstory than we get in the movie, which in the movie we get a little bit about the bastard offspring of Loki.
Mm-hmm.
They dive into it a little bit more in the book.
Cool.
Similar to the movie, Luke is the odd one out in the book as well, as far as being his friends have all got married with families and careers.
Mm-hmm.
However, Dom and Phil are close to divorce in the book. And one final similarity is Luke is the lone survivor at the end of the book.
Cool.
So I found those little notes. I do want to read the book, although this, as I said, the black metal band, Blood Frenzy, Vikings. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know. It could be interesting to read, I guess, if you look at it as maybe connected, but two separate things.
Yeah.
So let's move on to quotes.
All right.
Now, for me, there were not a ton of quotable moments because most of the quotes were much longer, parts of much longer conversations.
Yeah.
But the one that I did write down is from Dom, because I do think he did have some of his lines, as much as sometimes I wanted to throttle him, his lines were interesting at times. When they're talking about going on the shortcut, he says, "My old scoutmaster used to say, if the shortcut was a shortcut, it wouldn't be called the shortcut, it would be called the route."
Yeah, which is a good point. Yeah.
He's right. And I remember in seeing that thinking, yep, you're hurt and you're going to go take a shortcut through the woods. You have no idea where you're going. You're going to get lost. I could see it happening. Like, I could see it coming. But I found that quote to be kind of humorous.
Yeah.
Because it's true.
Very much.
Did you have any quotes?
Yeah, I had a few. And again, I like to pick out kind of the funnier stuff, but then there were some funny moments of them just kind of digging at each other, but nothing I thought was super, something to point out. But there were a few that I thought were kind of fun when they first go into that cabin and Phil just goes, "Well, this is clearly the house we get murdered in." Like he was not on board from the beginning. I did have Dom's shortcut quote in there. I love that a lot. I have the conversation between Luke and Dom kind of at the end of the movie, right before they run into the village and find themselves in that cabin. It's not necessarily funny, but it's kind of Luke being not really a downer, even though it seems that way, but he's just being a realist, and Dom is like accepting it for what it is. Because Dom says, "Do you think it's going to come back?" And he just looks at him, "Yeah, Yes. And then, they're talking about, well, we got to run. Or his piggyback. And he just goes, I think we're going to have to run. And yeah, okay. And it's just this like little conversation between the two of them where it's good to see that they're finally working together. And that comes from the last quote that I have, where they have the tear between them. And this one's not funny, but I think it just hit very poignantly, and it was quite a dig at Luke that really did hit him. Is when Luke comes down from the ridge and says, "There's something up there. We need to go." And they're not believing him. It's like, "Why aren't you listening to me?" And Dom just says, "Because I don't trust your judgment." Which leads into, what does that mean? And that's when Dom just spills out the whole, whether he blames him still for what happened to Rob, and then gets knocked square on his ass, rightfully, for doing so in front of everybody. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty like heavy moment, really.
It really was. I felt really bad for Luke there because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Dom, Phil, or Hutch could punish him any more than he punishes himself.
Yeah.
And that was apparent. And I think when he's asking, what does that mean? He knew what the answer was.
Oh, yeah. He knows, but he just wanted Dom to say it out loud. He's like, if you've got something to say to me,
say it.
Say it to me. Yeah.
Yep. Let it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this movie was harder, I think, because there weren't a lot of those comedic moments. Not necessarily comedic, but lighter moments in this movie. There were a few, but it was mostly very serious life and death moments. Yeah. And that was different, I think, from the movies that we've covered so far.
Absolutely.
There's definitely been a little more levity involved in those.
And I like that, but I think at the same time, it's not a bad thing. I love the levity. I love the comedy. I love the light moments. But I also really love a good horror story that just gets under your skin and really like messes with you, and also does a really good job at like speaking about humanity at the same time. And so even though it's not funny really in much any ways, this is also one of my favorite movies that I've seen in recent years, because it does what it does so well.
Like I said, when I watched it the first time, I did not like it. I'm not sure why. But the second time, I grew to appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
Because they were just things that I noticed that I didn't notice the first time around. By noticing those the dynamics between the characters helped me connect to it a lot more.
That's cool.
Yeah, watching Luke's evolution throughout the whole movie, I paid closer attention to that.
Yeah.
This time. And I didn't do it the first time. So I ended up liking it so much more because I felt more connected to it. Mm-hmm. And I watched it when it first came out, so it's been a while since I watched it.
Yeah, same here.
It's good to reconnect sometimes and see, because a lot of times you can dismiss a movie and say, nope, not again. That's not going to be a movie that I want to do or talk about or watch again. But then if you do that, you could miss out on the second watch, which often can change your opinion.
Yeah.
At least it did in my case.
Cool. I'm glad, because I really like this movie, so it would have been a little bit of a bummer for you to come on here and just be like, I hate this.
I could have, if I hadn't rewatched it, I could have come on and said, yeah, Pake wanted to do this movie, and I agreed to do it, and I didn't like it, and blah, blah, blah. But no, I definitely grew to appreciate it so much more.
That's awesome.
When you first suggested it, I agreed to it because I knew it was going to make me have to revisit a movie that I wasn't super into. Mm-hmm. And I thought it might be that situation where I would connect with it in a different way and might appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Because there are many movies that I've watched a second time and that's happened. And it ends up being one that I like to revisit because I connect with it at that time. So I think it's good sometimes to give a movie a second chance.
All right, Daphne, it's time for some feedback. We do have quite a little bit of feedback from some listeners this week.
We do.
Which I'm excited about. Of course, the first feedback we're going to get into this week is not ritual related, but that's okay. We've actually got a couple of pieces of feedback regarding a couple episodes ago with Twister. And so we'll go ahead and cover those. So this is kind of, listeners, if you have anything to say about movies that we've already previously covered that, you may not have watched and given us feedback that week on, but you have something to say after you've watched it and listened to us, or if you want to, give us some feedback on something we said, to clarify something we may have been confused about, or tell us how wrong we are about an opinion nicely, then go ahead and do that. You can write in for any movie that we've covered if you got something to say, and we'll always appreciate and love your feedback. So with that said, we'll get into some Twister feedback. Why don't you go ahead and cover this first one, Daphne?
All right. So the first bit of feedback that I'm going to read is from our friend Ben, and he has quite an opinion about a Twister, about one of our opinions. So Ben says, okay, so I listened to this latest episode and I feel compelled to leave you some feedback because I highly disagree with one of the points you made this week on Twister, specifically your point on Jonas being a useless and unneeded character. Jonas was the driving force for Bill going along with Joe and the Chasers to make sure Dorothy was successful. Finding out that Jonas was on the same mission with his stolen tech, he stayed to make sure his work was successful before Jonas. His reasoning for following Joe the first time was to get the still unsigned papers signed. But after that, his driving force was beating Jonas. Everything that came with that, rekindling with Joe and such, was all because of his competition with Jonas. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah, I totally get that. I agree that that's one of the things that drove Bill to stay and do what he was doing, is it was this competitive nature that was in him. I think
Absolutely.
The point we were really trying to make is that Jonas being like a little over the top nefarious mustache twirly villain in some of the cases was a little unnecessary. But no, I get why he's got to have some other reason to pull him in there. So I do appreciate that for sure, because it does shine a little bit more light on like, well, yeah, would he have stayed if it was only just Joe wanting to follow some tornado, and would he really have just stuck around only to do the mission without having that competitive fire lit under him? I don't know. Probably not. So you might have a point there.
Yeah, I think I can somewhat agree. And I also think that, remember, a lot of the Jonas scenes, the scenes with Jonas, were left on the cutting room floor. They were taken out for whatever reason. So there may be some other things that we miss from that. I can kind of understand where Ben is coming from. However, I still am not sure that I think Jonas was completely necessary. So I'm going to stick to my opinion.
All right, and we have one other one that mainly refers to Twister. It comes from Stephanie Jowers. She's talking about her and her husband, John, where she says, I'm listening to the Twister episode, loving it. Twister is one of my favorite movies. By the way, John and I have a storm shelter. So, hey, somebody who does. Then she says, John wants you to add Aliens to your list, and I want to hear your critique on it, because Tim Curry is the master.
Ooh.
So we'll consider those, Stephanie. It's possible. We'll see what happens down the road.
Definitely.
So you've already done my favorite. Everything else is just icing on the cake. Anytime John swerves the tiniest bit, I say, can I drive? And then the rest of the scene plays out ad nauseum.
I like that. That's awesome.
And we're so excited for you. A coworker mentioned Run for Your Lives as a potential podcast to pick up. I said, do it. And she said she hasn't been disappointed. That's awesome. Really love the support. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Being a cheerleader for us. We really appreciate it. You're awesome.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. We're having so much fun doing this, and I'm glad that it's coming across and it's enjoyable for people to listen to.
Yeah. All right. And let's get into feedback for this episode. We're actually talking about this week, which, again, we love your feedback for any movie. Give it to us. We love it. But since this episode we are talking about The Ritual, we've got a little bit of feedback for that. So, Daphne?
All right. So, Jeff has sent us a message about The Ritual. And it says, I'm not a huge horror movie fan, but something about this one caught my eye on Netflix, and now it's my favorite flick to put on for Halloween. Of the monster movies I've seen in my life, I thought The Ritual had the best monster reveal ever. The suspense was palpable, especially the scenes that had these long, continuous shots, and just before the cut, something twitches in the distance, and you are left with the sudden dread you've been watched the whole time. I saw this movie in broad daylight while folding laundry, and it still terrified me. The monster is mostly darkly lit during its scenes, but even if you Google the creature, it's still horrifying as fuck. Not to mention the Nordic inspired soundtrack that has led to some interesting Spotify rabbit holes, which I think we can both relate to.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea that immortality exists, but even as your body ages and fails, you're nothing but a living, withered husk rotting in an attic. Oh, goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Loved that take and how the community still embraced it. This movie has got some hidden layers. And then he gives us a book spoiler. And he says, I read the book, which follows the plot very similarly, except for the inciting incident, until the climax when you discover the beast is being summoned and worshipped by a murderous, Norse mythology obsessed death metal band. Yes, I can relate to that. That was a surprise. Also, the author really belabored the details of the trauma suffered by the protagonist. One of the few instances that I liked the movie more than the book.
Interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. And then we have one voicemail. We have one call in from the king of all podcast voicemails, Mr. Steve Brown.
Hello, Pake and Daphne. This is Steve. I just finished watching The Ritual, and interesting. I went in completely cold on this one. I didn't read any synopsis. I didn't read what it was about. I didn't even look until about a quarter of the way through what year it was made, so I kind of wanted to get that idea. But really, really interesting. That beginning, wow, tense, man. Not knowing what's going to happen, and of course, that's one of those situations that even though the other guys give him some flack about it, no one knows how you're going to react in a situation like that until you're in a situation like that, especially when you're just untrained, you don't know anything. So really tense. It was interesting that he was undertaking this journey as a smoker, but I guess he wasn't super smoker, but anyway, smoked enough. I wrote down when I saw when they were in the cabin, the first cabin, and they went upstairs. I wrote down creepy arts and crafts, and then I wrote down a quote: "A path means civilization." Does it really? You think just because it's a path does it mean civilization? And he sees those smoking pots, and he's like, "Oh, those were built by somebody, so we're getting somewhere." Yeah, you're getting somewhere, buddy. Not where you want to be, though. I guess they never found the tents. On the night when Hutch was taken, they never went back and found their tents, I guess. And I kept thinking that he had to get out of the woods, and getting out of the woods would be the answer. But of course, the mark on his chest and the one woman saying, "You have a great pain." But I loved there was some foreshadowing there with Dom when he said, "Burn this place to the ground," and of course, that's exactly what he does is he burns the place to the ground. So, okay, can't wait to hear your guys' take on it. Talk to you later.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
We were hoping we weren't going to scare you too badly with this movie, but it seems like you really enjoyed it, at least, to a point where you had some fun insight and stuff about it. So really appreciate that.
Definitely. I kind of relate to the whole arts and crafts thing because it was really, I'm not sure what the word is that I'm looking for, but I totally can get that from some of the decor.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess we got a couple of little shout outs we'll talk about again. Other podcasts, other things that we love and what we're doing and what's going on. And right there we had that voicemail from Steve. So if you like hearing Steve's voice, then check out the podcast Panels to Pixels, which Steve and our good friend Mark over there are hosting that, and they're wrapping up Umbrella Academy coverage and then moving into The Boys. So if you're a fan of those, check that out. And then also if you're a fan of Umbrella Academy, then Strange Indeed with Rima and me. We've got one episode left. We just dropped episode 9 of season 2 of Umbrella Academy, and we've got one more week left. And then we're moving into The Haunting of Bly Manor. So lots of great shows. If you're a fan of any of those, we got some podcasts for you to check out on those. And then if you like movie podcasts like this one, especially right here on this network, we are very happy to be part of the Pirate Core Entertainment family. We were lucky enough and honored to be the first podcast launched on the network, but now we have a podcast sibling. And it is the Adrenaline Cinema podcast hosted by Mark. And the first episode is out now. And you can go search that on Spotify and hopefully soon some other places. But I know for a fact it's on Spotify if you're listening there. And it is him and our friend Ben covering the movie Die Hard. Because Adrenaline Cinema will be covering a lot of classic action movies that just get your adrenaline pumping, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to watch or listen to their first episode about Die Hard, then that is up now.
And with that, we are at our rankings, Pake.
All right.
Are you ready
Yeah.
to give your ranking on this movie?
I am. Let's see. Now, I don't know. You might not agree with me still on here, but again, I gushed about this movie for almost an hour. Honestly, I give it a solid 9. It is up there. I just from the character growth to just the cinematography and the production value of this movie. I mean, even we talk about dislikes. We didn't even really get into that this week because I honestly didn't even have any. And it's a newer movie, so it also has the ability to where like the CGI was even like super on par, and there was nothing to complain about there. So I just think, I mean, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but as far as like all of those things that I look for, I think it nailed them all perfectly, the ones that it was going for. So yeah.
All right. Are you ready for my verdict?
All right, I'll rip it off quick. No, go for it.
No, I think you might be surprised. I think because I did connect with Luke this time around, and the Jotun was a pretty terrifying creature, despite the fact it wasn't as big as some of the other ones that we've talked about, I would give this movie a solid 8.
Cool.
Not a 5.
Yeah.
Not a 6. I would give it a solid 8.
That's good. I'll take it.
So, next on the Run for Your Lives podcast, we are going to be covering A Quiet Place.
Ooh, I'm excited about that one. That's going to be fun.
It was written, directed, and stars John Krasinski, along with his real-life wife, Emily Blunt.
Yes. Such a good movie.
It is, and there's so much that we unpack in that movie, including Pake has a special story that he shares about a trip he took.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that for now. That's just a little teaser. We'll get to that next week.
It's a lot of fun, guys. I think you're definitely going to enjoy it.
Well, to submit theories, feedback of any kind, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/runforyourlivespodcast, or you can email us at runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com, where you can send us whatever feedback you have through email, or send us a voicemail. Record your voice on a voice memo app or something on your phone and email it to us. It's a good way to get it to us. You can find us on Twitter at RYFL Podcast, on Instagram at Run For Your Lives Podcast. And then if you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends. Share the love. We always appreciate that. You and your friends can always find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much all podcast players that exist. And you can go to runforyourlivespodcast.com for all the links you'll ever need to social media and different podcast players. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that's the best way to share the love, get us out there even more, and we super appreciate that.
Yes, we do. And with that, we have reached the end of our show.
Yay.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pate.
And if you have to run, you better run for your lives.
Bye-bye.